What does it say that the Venom comic, the tie-in to the main Venom War event, is better than the Venom War event? It's crazy. So what this does is this brings us to Chthon in Marvel Comics, a guy you rarely ever see, but is immensely powerful. And one of the things to keep in mind about the Venom comic tie-in is we still don't fully understand what's going on. All we know is that Dylan Brock, the son of Eddie in the future, has come to the present day to stop some kind of future calamity. So we're learning about this as we go along. Now, Doctor Strange from the future is the one who sent him on this mission, and that's why he's with Doctor Strange in the present day. Literally, Future Strange told him, go find myself in the present day, talk to him, explain what's going on, he will help you. And so what happened is that Dylan was on a kind of quest to basically magically imbue a kind of weapon of sorts that he could use against whatever future threat that happened to be. This leads them to the Flickering Realms, the home of Chthon. Now, one of the cool things that happens here is that Doctor Strange tells Dylan Chthon is more than a demon. He is to demons what the universe is to humanity. Now, this is a very, very interesting statement to make here, because as we mentioned in previous videos, when it comes to Chthon, he's the most powerful of all the elder gods who ever existed on Earth. Cyttorak and all those different guys, right? Cyttorak, of course, being the one that gives Juggernaut his power. And so to say that Chthon is to demons what the universe is to humanity, I wouldn't go so far as to say that this invokes people like Mephisto, so on and so forth. I would be kind of curious to see who would actually win in a conflict between Mephisto and Chthon. If I were a betting man, I would say Chthon would probably win because Chthon wields chaos magic, but it does create an interesting scenario. But Stephen Strange continues on and kind of informing Dylan and ostensibly us about the nature of Mephisto, where he says he will challenge you and he will test you. He will ask you for something in return for his help. It might seem small, but whatever it is will be valuable. And so where Dylan responds in saying that I have nothing to give, the response of Stephen is, you have plenty. You take it all for granted because you don't understand the value of it, but you have a lot. You have things that he has never had, and he will take them if he can. And he says he will twist any deal and he will take all he can. Be very, very careful, Dylan Brock. And as Dylan and Stephen Strange descend down into the throne room of Chthon, Dylan suddenly finds himself in the future. Now, that's one of the cool things about the nature of Chthon, is that given the level of power he has and the ability to wield chaos magic, when you're in his realm, he is, by all standards of measurement, God, as far as you're concerned. He can do anything he wants to and create any illusion he wants to. When Dylan shows up here, he sees Chthon as just a regular guy. Now, we will see Chthon's true form. Don't worry, this is not one of those stories where it's just he appears as a dude and that's it. But what we also get is this kind of revelation of Dylan's future, where Chthon says, I like what you've done with the place, nothing like the smell of nuclear fallout in the morning. And that where Dylan's kind of like, are you Chthon? His response is, I am the Lord below, or in this case, above. And so where Dylan kind of begins to ask, like, Chthon, I've come for your help, Chthon just sort of finishes it, finishes that statement for him. And he's like, I know why you're here, Dylan Brock. You broke the world. Well, I suppose it depends on how you look at it. Personally, I rather like it. It's very quiet, peaceful, in a dystopian way. And so I love the way they're written, right? One of the best things about Cronenberg is that she writes stories in a really, really character-driven way. And so it's really awesome to see Chthon just kind of relating to Dylan as like a regular guy. And so Chthon is like, listen, right? What's that noise? And Dylan doesn't really know if what he's seeing is real or not. And that's what you're dealing with when you come across a being, and really a demon, as powerful as someone like Chthon. His ability to alter reality within his own dimension is on such a scale that for the average person, there is no differentiation between what's real and what's false. Not until the illusion is pulled back and reality is shown to you for what it really is. And so where Dylan doesn't really understand what's happening, he kind of does, but he doesn't. He asks, is this real? And the response of Chthon, it's as real as anything. And so it's basically him saying like, I guess, we're in my realm, but what I do here can and will kill you if you let it. And so that's when Dylan comes across these, again, kind of symbiote hybrid type things, and he just kind of tries to fight them off as best he can. Again, we're not given a lot of information here initially, but we are given information here in a minute in terms of what's happening. But what it shows here is that even in the future, when Dylan was facing off against these things, the best he could do was hold his own for as long as he could. But there was no actually defeating them. There was just kind of holding them off temporarily, and that was basically it. Of course, one of them gets their hands on him, and then then, of course, Chthon approaches and says, man, they are fun. And he's like, so let me get this straight. The half symbiote, half machines came along seemingly out of nowhere, and you thought nukes would be the answer. And then he follows up and he says, don't sweat it. We've been taking bets on how long it would be before humanity nuked themselves into oblivion. I had my money on 1962. And so what this kind of establishes here, and this is what Chthon was referring to when he was saying that Dylan was the one that essentially killed the world, is that somehow or another in the future, symbiotes merge with technology. Now, we don't know how, we don't know why, we simply know that they do. And basically like Skynet, right, from the Terminator series, they seem to just kind of become self-aware and then go on the hunt for humanity. And so in response, humanity destroys the world in an effort to destroy the threat. It's a really interesting sort of turn in how humanity handles things. And so in the face of all of this, that Dylan asked the question, will you help us? Will you help me? We have to stop this. And this is where the nature of Chthon comes into play, where he says, I don't know. Your plan is deliberate as it is feeble. Tell me, when you went back in time, you saw your parents. When you were there, why didn't you just shoot Eddie Brock? Why not just kill him? Would it not be easier? You could simply do it now if you wanted to. Because if Eddie Brock dies in the past, Eddie Brock never has Dylan. And sure, Dylan would cease to exist, but that would also mean that Eddie Brock never got the Venom symbiote. And so the series of events that transpired, from Eddie getting the symbiote to his wife Anne Weying, the mother of Dylan, getting the symbiote, giving birth to Dylan, who was born with symbiote powers, despite not actually being a host for the symbiote itself initially, that all those events never would have taken place. And had they never taken place, that future never would have come to fruition. And so again, Dylan asks, is this real? And the response of Chthon, you are asking me to give something of me, yet you are not prepared to give up anything yourself. And that's where Dylan says, I am. If I thought it would help, I would take my father's life. I would give up my own life in an instant. And he says, there is nothing I would not give to stop this. And that's where Chthon says, good to know. And these two little kids just come running out of nowhere, right? Being chased by these kind of monsters. And so Chthon presents Dylan with a test. And he says, I'll do something, right? You want me to do a thing? I will do a thing. He says, you choose. I'll save them or you save them. Which one are you willing to do? And Dylan chooses to save them, essentially at his own life, right? He gets the kids to safety. And then of course, he's met by the return of these, symbiote machines, and they kill him. And that's when he wakes up in the realm of Chthon. And it's cool because Chthon says, you were a fool coming here, Strange. I was before man, I will be after. Why would I involve myself in the downfall of your world? Now, one of the things about Chthon, and I may have referred to him a minute ago as Mephisto, I don't remember, but one of the things about Chthon is that when he's here and when he's always trying to gain access back to Earth, it's because he wants to rule and dominate humanity. And so while he does make jokes about the idea of humanity nuking itself and so on and so forth, he sees himself as the rightful ruler of Earth, i.e. humanity doesn't destroy itself until I say it does, because the human race are my playthings, and I will treat them as such. That's why Stephen Strange responds with the question, does it not bother you that humanity will end without your permission or your influence? And that's why Chthon responds himself in saying, clever little wizard, do not try to twist my thoughts. Because Stephen Strange is walking a knife's edge here. Do not let his confidence fool you. On one hand, he's just kind of like, I need to present the facade that I am confident here, that I understand what I'm doing. And he does understand what he's getting into, which is why the other side of him is terrified, because facing off against someone like Chthon with the vast power he wields, he could kill Stephen Strange like that and not think twice about it, right? So Stephen very much has his life on the line by being here. And that's why there is no disrespect. That's why there is nothing but the recognition of the power Chthon has without him ingratiating himself, where he says, it was an honest question. I have seen this future too. I have my part to play in all of this. My involvement pains me. My future failure, it haunts me. I am asking that you give us a chance. Give him a chance. He stepped in between you and danger, Chthon. And Chthon says, like a dog yapping at an approaching train. Sure, he did it, but he didn't understand the significance of what he was doing. But that's when the children chime in and say, actually, Stephen Strange is right? He saved us. He passed your test. The whole purpose behind this test was to ask the question, is he approaching you humble in recognition of your power? Or is he approaching you arrogant arrogant in defiance of your power, and he's approaching humble. Therefore, he deserves a shot. And that's why Chthon says, very well, Dylan Brock, I will help you for a price. Now, this is really cool, right? Because Dylan asks, like, what is this price? And the response of Chthon, what do you say, girls? Now, of course, again, they are part and parcel to Chthon himself, so to hear them speak is to hear him speak. But they say, I will have your first love and all you know of your mother. I will have the music you know and your relationships. I will have your taste. I will have your dreams at night. And Chthon says, and I will have your name, Dylan Brock. And that's where Stephen looks at him and just says, remember what I said, Dylan, right? And that's the cool thing. Stephen Strange cannot tell him what to do. I mean, he could, but in reality, only Dylan understands the significance of these things, and only he understands the value of these individual things. And so that's where Dylan asks, if I give you all of this, you will infuse your magic, your chaos magic, in the weapon that I have, and send us both back to the Sanctum Sanctorum safe and sound. The response of Chthon, I will. And so that's where Dylan agrees and says, then I accept. And so what happens is that we get this kind of monologue to a degree, right? The molten metal gleams, stirring slightly as the chaotic magic touches it. And as it melts together, both man and symbiote feel strangely empty, but they do not know what is wrong or what is missing. Now, it's really interesting because in that final statement here, right, they do not know what's missing. If the knowledge of a thing is removed from you, then you don't know that you ever had knowledge of that thing in the first place. And so that's why they don't know what they're missing, because they don't know they ever had it, right? But the whole thing of Dylan, Stephen Strange starts to wake him up, right? Shaking him and saying, hey, Dylan, are you okay? And Dylan's response, who is Dylan? So he doesn't know who he is. He's lost his entire identity. He doesn't know who his mother is. He doesn't know who he ever fell in love with. Everything that makes him who he is gone. The only thing he knows now is the fact that he's on this mission. But even then, he doesn't know how he got here. He doesn't know exactly what he's supposed to be doing. In a lot of ways, it creates a massive stopgap for him on this mission. But such is the price you pay when you're dealing with a demon like Chthon. And so what happens is Stephen asks, do you still want to continue this journey? And again, Dylan says, of course, I don't know how to get there. But that's when you get this kind of monologue for Stephen Strange, because it says Stephen wishes he could help carry the burden, but it is not yet his time. So Stephen Strange cannot go with him. It's simply not his path. Now, the reality here is just kind of a hand-wavy explanation of the fact that Stephen Strange can't be involved in this. But ultimately, where Dylan asks, like the girls, right, were they real, what I saw there? And the response of Strange is, they were all him, I'm pretty sure. And so ultimately, Dylan thanks him and then passes through the portal for whatever comes next. And it just says he walks. For days, he walks. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know where he's going. He simply just comes across this tree in this frozen, barren wasteland. Now, those of you guys who are familiar with Marvel Comics, you already know exactly where he is, right? I mean, it's not that difficult to figure out. But for those of you guys who were unfamiliar with comics, it is kind of a mystery. And so with Dylan and the Venom symbiote working together, that the symbiote says, we've been here before, I recognize that tree. And that's where Dylan gets frustrated, right? Like, what trick is this? Are we walking in circles? And he's like, I can't do this anymore. I can't go any further. But he goes anyway, because the mission has to be completed and the future relies on his actions here. And so as he walks, he ends up coming across a house in the distance. Now, one of the cool things that goes on is he just kind of repeats who he is to himself, right? I am Old Man, I am Venom. I don't know what my actual name is, so Old Man is all he refers to himself as. As he mumbles this to himself over and over, it kind of becomes a bit of condensed language, and he starts saying things like, I am Old Man Venom. So this is cool, because I'm really kind of hoping this is where the story leads, that Dylan does become Old Man Venom. That would be amazing. But as he stumbles across this house, this overwhelming sensation of feeling warm and feeling welcome comes over him. And when that happens, this woman appears and simply says, you must be tired, come in, have something to eat. Now, the narrative as it's being explained here is that while the food doesn't really have any measure of taste or anything along those lines, but that's due more to the deal that Dylan made with Chthon and lost his sense of taste, that he also starts to realize, or really the symbiote starts to realize, someone's poking around in his brain, seemingly this woman, trying to understand who he is, what's going on here, all that kind of stuff, right? It literally says it tingles like a feather brushing over his mind, gently prodding and pushing his thoughts. Now, Venom, again, is the first one to realize it, and that as this mind is kind of scanning over Dylan's thoughts, it realizes that Dylan has has no name, that he has no mother, no friends, only a purpose. Now, of course, the Venom symbiote manifests and goes after the woman, and we end up seeing the woman transform into Loki. Now, here's the kicker about this. Number one, we don't know how this version of Loki relates to the God of Stories Loki. We'll probably figure that out in future issues of this tie-in, which is phenomenal. And number two, if anybody out there has the power to undo what Chthon did to Dylan Brock, it would be Loki. He is way more powerful than people think he is, especially if this is the God of Stories Loki. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Let me know what you think down in the comments section, and I will catch you all later. Peace.